And welcome back to our next edition of the CBB Review Studio podcast. I am Dan Siegel, joined as usual by my co-host, Mat Mlodzinski, and we are here with another edition of CBB Rank, counting down the teams 5 at a time from 100 to 1, leading up to the start of the regular season for college basketball. And please subscribe to our channel if you would like to, backtrack and look at all these episodes, watch all these episodes. We've gone all the way from 100. Today we are doing 40 to 36. We're going to kind of release them at a rapid pace to get to 1 by the time the regular season starts. But let's dive into it. So we got number 40 on our CBB rank. We got St. Mary's. And, we talked about San Diego State, I think, last episode or a couple episodes ago. It's a program out of the West Coast that has just been consistently solid year after year after year. And I think if we look at the WCC, the West Coast Conference, where St. Mary's plays, usually the last couple of years it's been 1A, 1B, whatever order, typically Gonzaga 1A, St. Mary's 1B. I think this year there's a real legitimate 1-2, with St. Mary's being 2 behind Gonzaga. But I do see some intrigue here. I see what there is to like. I think when you got your WCC Player of the Year, Augustus Marshalinas, returning, even though his numbers were not amazing to earn West Coast Conference Player of the Year, that's huge. Mitchell Saxon also returning at the center spot, really solid guy at the rim in the paint in both ways. They got some other guys they'll add. I'll let you talk about them, but I think you could definitely put St. Mary's higher than 40. I will double down the fact that they're definitely 2 behind Gonzaga in the West Coast Conference. There's no debate about that.
I got a trivia question for you, Dan.
All right, let's do it.
Before Randy Bennett took over as the head coach of St. Mary's in 2001, do you know what St. Mary's record was the year before that?
How many games did they play, first off?
29 games.
29 games. I mean, the way you're phrasing the question, I'll guess I don't know, 13 and 16.
2-27. Do you know how many losing seasons Randy Bennett has had as the head coach of St. Mary's?
A maximum of 2.
One,
yeah.
The following year, they won 9 games. And I bring this up, too, because our next CB Review Courtside episode is with Kyle Smith, the head coach of Stanford, who was on the St. Mary's coaching staff alongside Randy Bennett. So kind of a cool thing there. He saw this grow. And I bring all of this up because St. Mary's is the one team in CBB rank that I think you can just throw the stats out the window. It doesn't matter. We don't have to talk about these players and these stats because Randy Bennett is going to figure it out one way or another, right? This isn't a team that recruits top 100 guys. They're not going to get the top players in the portal, but Randy Bennett finds a way year in and year out. So whether or not St. Mary's is going to be a 25-win team this year, I don't know if they're going to be, but they've got Augustus Marshalinas back. I know they lose Aiden Mahoney to UConn, but they've got their point guard back. They've got Mikey Lewis, an intriguing freshman. They've got some other players, Mitchell Saxon. They have enough to have another good year. And for myself, we can leave it at that, right? St. Mary's is going to be good.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I'll add a little more. I think, like you mentioned, they don't really get top 100 guys. That said, they have a freshman named Mikey Lewis who will really need to step up in that backcourt regardless. And I'm confident that Randy Bennett will find what he needs out of him because, like you said, no Aiden Mahaney anymore. Also, no Alex Dukas. He was big for them.
Yep.
But yeah, the bottom line is St. Mary's is consistent. They're always good. And most of the reason that is because they'll always be elite defensively. The last 4 years per Bart Torvik, their defensive rankings were 5th, 11th, 6th, and 11th. So I do think they lose more than a game or two in the West Coast Conference this year. We talked about, I just mentioned, I think Gonzaga is significantly above them. I also, San Francisco is good. Washington State, Oregon State are there. Santa Clara, I'm really high on. So they'll have some competition, but I totally agree on that sentiment. Randy Bennett took nothing and made it everything, basically. So
yeah, it's a testament to what coaching can do in college basketball, and I think we can agree that, you can debate, like I said, how many wins St. Mary's can be, right? Last year was St. Mary's year. I don't think they totally took advantage of it, but Randy Bennett always takes advantage of making more out of less.
All right, let's move on. Number 39, we got Providence, who narrowly missed the tournament last year. And they did lose Devin Carter and Josh Oduro. But I think they really got a great transfer class. This was written in the article. I'm not sure if it was you or Ariel or someone else. But
yeah, it was me.
It was you. Okay, so I'll let you go in a sec. But, they really replenished this with a great transfer class. I think Jabri Abdurrahim was real solid at Georgia. Bensley Joseph had a good year at Miami, so it'll be him and Jaden Pierre kind of splitting the point guard duties there. Wesley Cardette, obviously the wild card, put up huge numbers at Chicago State. We got to wait and see on that. But what do you see out of this Providence roster since you wrote the article?
I see a lot of great things in this Providence article. No trivia question for you here, but I am going to talk a lot about Bryce Hopkins because the return of Bryce Hopkins is going to be crucial, right? He went down in that game against my Seton Hall Pirates, and you knew right away that that's going to be the loss that ends Providence's season, and it actually really didn't. Devin Carter just took over from that point forward, right? And, of course, Devin Carter not back this year, so we're going to have to see what Providence does without him. I don't think they have a player that's nearly going to be as dominant in the backcourt as Devin Carter, but they have a very, very deep backcourt, right? Bensley Joseph from Miami is going to bring a lot of experience. Wesley Cardette Jr. Should be a guy that can knock down some shots, score the basketball, a plug-and-play type of player. But Jaden Pierre as well, right? He was a crucial player for Providence last year, might end up coming off the bench. So you've got a real good span of three guards right there that are going to play a lot of minutes for this Providence team. Corey Floyd Jr., another experienced guard as well. And a player that I think is going to make a lot of noise this year for Providence, and Friars fans are all about him, is Rich Barron, right? Shot at over 42% from three last season. What's he going to be for the Friars this year, right? I mean, that's a guy that can just change the game. When you're that good of a three-point shooter, when you've got that many other options, this is a team that has guys up and down the roster. They seem like they could go 8-9 deep really this year. I think the Friars are going to be really competitive in the Big East. I don't know if they're going to be have the star potential they did last year, but they've got the type of roster to be competitive from game 1 through 20, which is needed in this conference.
I want to emphasize just in terms of their front court how massive they are. Not just in terms of impact, but in terms of size. Like, you got Hopkins, who you talked about, along with Chris Esondoko from St. Joe's. You got this guy Anton Bonk from the JUCO level, and that'll really benefit them on the defensive end. That'll make them a much higher ceiling defensive team, and that's really what I like most about Providence. We have them 6th in the Big East. That's kind of where I see them overall. I think they're kind of a middle of the pack Big East team, which could very well be good enough to make the tournament. I don't know how many bids you're thinking of in the Big East this year, but more than last year, I would say. I think hopefully the middle of the pack Big East is kind of on the right side of the bubble this year, because that's kind of where I see Providence again.
Yeah, I think Providence is going to be, they're not going to be that top tier. Last year, there were moments where, especially with a healthy Bryce Hopkins, they could have been. I think they might be a little bit lower, but again, Kim English, and I just did my article for the top coaches in college basketball as far as all the Power 5 conference coaches are concerned. And, I'm really high on Kim English. I mean, he's a guy that is one of the youngest coaches in all of college basketball, already seems to be making moves at Providence. And it seems like he's a player's coach. He's a recruiter. And, it's going to be fun to see what he does with the Friars this season.
Moving on, we got number 38, Michigan. Moved on. They moved on as well. They moved on from Jawan Howard, who had a rough stretch really in his tenure, and they got Dusty May. And Dusty May brings in kind of an interesting roster. We've talked about this before in I think our transfer series, but that two-headed monster at the center spot. They got Vlad Golden from FAU, 7'1", and then they got Danny Wolf from Yale, who's 7'0". I think obviously we've seen Vlad Golden. We saw him on that FAU tournament run a few years ago. He's going to need his minutes, but you can't just spell him with Danny Wolf and say, Danny Wolf, you're playing 15, 20 minutes a night. Like, these guys are going to realistically have to play together. And Dusty May did indicate that he's very well willing to play these guys together. I'm interested to see how that turns out in practice. But, like, that's their front court right there. It's between them, and then they got a guy from Alabama, Sam Walters, he's more of a guy that could stretch the floor, and I guess a little bit of a shorter guy at 6'10", but that's their front court right there. So I think that's like the biggest storyline that glares out when I look at Michigan.
Yeah, right. Such a small player at 6'10". Not sure how they're going to work around him at power forward. I don't know what the heck Michigan's going to do with 2 7-footers. What I will say, Dan, is true. Dusty May already coached Vlad Golden, so he knows how he's going to move up and down the court, right? So it's kind of all about putting Danny Wolf in a good situation. Like, you already know how to work with Golden because you did so at FAU. What are you going to do with Danny Wolf? It's going to be interesting because, again, Wolf is a guy that's going to need to see the core. I've said this before. Mid-major guys don't always translate to power conference basketball. Ivy League guys usually do, more so than most mid-major guys, because the Ivy League is that good of a mid-major conference. They're just coached well, honestly. They're just coached better than most mid-majors.
And
so,
yeah,
you want to say something?
I was just going to say, and the fact that, you're usually not always, but you're usually staying for 4 years in your Ivy League school. So you're having experienced guys transfer too. No,
that's true. That's true. And then this is a team that has a lot of experience as well. I mean, Sam Walters is the only guy that's, hasn't played more than 2 years of college basketball in this projected starting lineup. And Michigan's trying to turn a tide. And I think they've got the guys to be able to do it, honestly. Like, when I first looked at this team, I wasn't so sure. I think that Dusty May has a chance to keep Michigan competitive in the Big Ten, and they seem to be moving in a good direction. I'm not sure if they're going to make the tournament this year. I don't know. I mean, Juwan Howard didn't have a lot of great things going at Michigan, and I think there's going to need to be a culture change, but I think they're off to a good start.
I like them as a tournament team. I'm not going to lie to you. I think I like their backcourt too, with Trey Donaldson from Auburn and Roddy Gale from Ohio State. I think they could play really well off of each other as well, with like Gale as a slasher, Donaldson more of like the shooter, distributor type.
Sure.
I do realize that a lot of these Dusty May teams, specifically the one that made the run the tournament, were so like guard oriented. So they're going to have a lot on their plate, but like you add Pippen, the top 75 freshman on the bench, like Reuben Jones from North Texas, like really, really good 3-and-D guy. I think they could do good things in year one of Dusty May's coaching tenure. Like, we projected them 9th of 18. I'm guessing based on your tone, you project them around that range. I wouldn't be surprised to see them like 5th to 7th in the Big Ten, which you have 18 teams. That's pretty damn good.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd probably go toward the lower end, maybe 7th or 8th. But yeah, I mean, Michigan's still, they're going to be right. To me, they're a bowl team. And it's all about how that culture changes.
All right. 37, we've got Miami. And I have some bold takes here, actually, because I don't know if I want to spoil this. I guess I'll do it. If you're listening to this podcast, you'll know ahead of time. I'm putting out my top 25 pretty soon. I'm thinking about having Miami there.
Ooh.
Yeah. So last season, I know they fell off like really hard. They lost their final 10 games of the season. That's how hard they fell off. And that's, I think, what makes the public so hesitant to buy in on them. And I completely understand that. But Jim Larinaga, their head coach, has enough of a recent body of work for me to genuinely give him the benefit of the doubt. Like, this old man has actually been rejuvenated by the NIL era. It's rare you can say that, especially for someone in his like demographic. But and then you add the fact that they also have Norshad Omier and Wooga Poplar gone. But man, this guy went portaling hard. They also returned Nigel Pack, who's like, he's been a legitimately good college basketball player for 4 years now. Matthew Cleveland reached his upside last year, I think more than I expected, more than a lot of people expected. He's back. But like the transfers, Jalen Blackman at the shooting guard, an absolute dog at Stetson. Front court, Brendan Johnson from ECU, Lynn Kidd from Virginia Tech. Like, these guys have their flaws, sure, but they'll give you plenty of competence. And then really what I haven't even mentioned yet is that they have a top 10 recruit in Jaleel Bethea, and a top 50 recruit in Austin Schwartz. These guys coming off the bench, like, I think this roster is loaded. And I am willing to give Coach Larrañaga the benefit of the doubt. I'm willing to say that their last 10 games, all losses last year, was a fluke. And the last thing I'll say before I hand it over to you, because I went a little bit of a rant here, but like, everybody's ranking UCLA in the top 25. I won't spoil whether we do in CB rank, but everyone's ranking them. Could we say, like, with the same consistency, like, how can you say UCLA's top 25 team and Miami isn't? I feel like it's the same logic. Like, oh, great coach, loaded roster, they'll bounce back. We'll give them the benefit of the doubt. And UCLA was worse for like more of the season last year.
Look, I'm with you, Dan. Miami looks really, really good on paper. I mean, this team, 1 through 5 in the starting lineup, have 5 legit players, right? Whether it's power conference guys, Jalen Blackman, another guy who might be coming from a mid-major conference, but he averaged over 21 points per game, right? He was one of the leading scorers in all of college basketball. So he's going to score the ball for this Miami team one way or another. I mean, the guy's efficient from the field, even at the guard position. 91% from the free throw line, almost 40% from 3. He's a great pickup. Matthew Cleveland was really big for Miami last year. Brandon Johnson from East Carolina, he's going to be a great player at the 4. I mean, there's guys at every position on this Miami team. Look, you really said it, so I don't need to say it much more, but they do look like a top 25 team. That is a bold take, but I agree with you. So yeah. I'm going to second you right there.
Yeah, it's a bold take, but it's like it's a well-reasoned take. It's not just like a gut feel. Like I think I could really back that up, and obviously we'll really see. This will either be ice cold or burning hot 2 months into the season. So we'll see, and I'm excited. That's the whole point. That's why making college basketball content is fun. But yeah. All right, 36, last team of this episode. We've got Ohio State, and this is interesting because Jake Diebler coached them for 11 games last year. Mm. He went 8-3, and that 8-3 was satisfactory enough for him to earn the full-time head coaching role there. I'm not sure really what that indicates about the long-term future of Ohio State. Like, I'm kind of concerned about that. I don't know if Diebler is going to last 7 to 10 years, really raise this program or get them back to national relevance. But I think really being able to keep some sort of stability in terms of roster with leading scorer Bruce Thornton coming back is huge. Him at the guard spot, first team All Big Ten last year, really good in that pick and roll game. And him and Michi Johnson, the addition, Michi Johnson was from South Carolina. Like, with Johnson, you could play Thornton off ball. He could thrive even more, like in the shooting efficiency department. So with those two guys, there's definitely stuff to like about Ohio State in terms of 2024 to 2025.
Yeah, I mean, as we've been going through these 5 teams today, excuse me, these are probably the best list of 5 teams in this episode, and obviously that's bound to make sense because we're getting closer to number 1. But just overall, there haven't been one team in these 5 that I've been like, look, this is a terrible team, right? These all look like solid teams. Ohio State can, obviously as well. I probably would have had Ohio State, though, to say that toward the bottom of this list. I think they are the worst of these 5 teams, but I think Jake Diebler has so much potential as a head coach, right? I mean, 8-3 in those 11 games. You just can't say enough about what he could bring to this Buckeyes program, and he's got the players to make it work. I'm a huge fan of what Bruce Thornton brings at the point guard spot, right? He's so physical. He's so physically gifted. That alone just makes it tough for other teams to guard him. Michi Johnson, we know what he can do. He's also had a lot of great years in college basketball. You talk about Miami and Nigel Pack. I mean, Michi Johnson, one step lower. He's had some good years, and that experience will help. The biggest question mark for me is, again, down low, Sean Stewart and Aaron Bradshaw, right? Yeah. You've got projects. Are those projects going to work? I'm not sure. It's going to be a test of Jake Diebler in really year 1. You can keep those 11 games. This is his first year as the head coach, and it's going to be a big test for him.
Yeah, I'll elaborate more on that last point you made because that was a big point of emphasis in my article. Stewart from Duke, he really just couldn't see the court much as a freshman for a great team. So, again, they're going to rely on him a lot. Aaron Bradshaw from Kentucky, he was a prize recruit. Same thing, just had an underwhelming freshman year in terms of production. And with so many studs on the roster, you can't really work through it. You're just not going to play. So I think like that's really the make or break with Ohio State. That's why they could be a top 25 team in 2 months, or that's why they could be completely out of the picture in 2 months. And, I think there's a lot to like here, especially with Diebler. I think last year I looked at some of the metrics, like the really advanced metrics. I'm a big like shotquality.com guy. And they spaced very well last year because they had the defined roles. Like they got a lot of open threes. Zedkey and Felix Okpara, those two guys like combined led the country in dunks. So I think like if you could similarly define roles, like these guys are your shooters, these guys are your, distributors, these guys are your, finishers around the rim, and kind of space out well, then there's going to be similar potential with this new squad. So yeah, all in all, 36 is completely where I'd have Ohio State after I say all that.
Yeah, no, Buckeyes, again, them and Michigan are going to be teams that are going to be right there at the end of the season competing in the Big Ten.
All right. Well, that will do it for today's edition of the CBB Review Studio podcast. Like I said in the beginning, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Helps us out a lot. That's why we do it. And, we've had episodes from 5 at a time, from 100 all the way. We're going to get to 1 before the start of the college basketball regular season. So you'll get all that with a subscription. Thanks for watching, everyone. Thanks for listening, and take care.